Good morning, second graders. It's Monday, the start of our second week of remote learning. I hope that things get easier for us as we continue to work on this, but I know that I felt a lot better at the end of last week. I got to see some of your faces. I also got to see the work that you've all been posting on Seesaw, so that made me feel pretty good. I want to tell you guys that I'm really proud of you. Change is not easy, but we're adjusting, and I think you guys are doing amazing. So last week we started reading The Night at Dawn, the second Magic Treehouse book. We're about halfway through already, and it's been a few days since I've looked at this, so I want to do a quick recall before I start reading. I figured maybe I'd ask you guys a few questions. I'll give you a moment to think about things, and then I will retell what I remember. You ready? All right, so my first question is, who are the main characters? So think about that answer to yourself. You might just think about it in your head. Maybe you'll answer out loud. The main characters are Jack and Annie. And what do we know about Jack and Annie? I know that Annie is adventurous and that Jack gets scared and nervous about all of Annie's plans, but he typically tends to go along with them after he expresses his nerves. And here's a big question for this book. How did they get to the castle? So I want you guys to just take a moment, think about all the things that happened. We're on chapter 5, so think about everything that's happened so far, all the things that got them to the castle. All right, here's my recap. They found a treehouse in their backyard, and in that treehouse there were a lot of books inside. And Jack and Annie were thinking that maybe there was like a magic person that built the treehouse or put the books there. They opened up a book about knights and castles, and then they heard a noise of a horse. And when they looked out the window, they saw a knight in shining armor riding a black horse. And they climbed down the ladder to explore. And let me see, is there anything else? Oh, the last thing. There was a man, and he said, "Who art thou?" in this really deep, scary voice, and Jack and Annie started to run away. So that brings us to chapter 5, and chapter 5 is called Trapped. "Come on," cried Annie. Jack raced behind her. Were they being followed? "Here, quick!" Annie dashed towards a door off the hallway. She pushed the door open. The two of them stumbled into a dark, cold room. The door creaked shut behind them. "Give me the flashlight," said Annie. Jack handed it to her, and she switched it on. Yikes! A row of knights sitting right in front of them. And here's the picture it gives us. Annie flicked off the light. "Silence! They aren't moving," Jack whispered. Annie turned the light back on. "Oh, they're just suits," Jack said. "Without heads?" said Annie. "Let me have the flashlight for a second," said Jack, "so I can look at the book." Annie handed him the flashlight. He pulled out the castle book. He flipped through the pages until he found what he was looking for. Jack put the book away. "It's called Armory," he said. "It's where armor and weapons are stored." He shined the flashlight around the room. "Oh, man," said Jack. The light fell on the shiny leg plates and arm plates of the suits. On shelves filled with helmets and weapons, on shields, spears, swords, crossbows, and battle axes. There was a noise in the hall. "Voices! Let's hide," said Annie. "Wait, I gotta check on something first," said Jack. "It'll just take a second. Hold on." He tried to lift a helmet from the shelf. It was too heavy. He bent over and dragged the helmet over his head. The visor slammed shut. Oh, forget it. It was worse than having a 5-year-old on your head. More like having a 10-year-old on your head. So remember at the beginning of the book, he said it was so heavy. I think he said it was 40 pounds. And so he was trying to make a connection to that. So he had said at the beginning of the book, it would be like having a 5-year-old on your head. So now that it's actually on his head, he thinks it's heavier and said, all right, it's like having a 10-year-old on your head. Not only could Jack not lift his head, he couldn't see anything either. "Jack!" Annie's voice sounded far away. "The voices are getting closer. Turn off the flashlight." He struggled to get the helmet off. Suddenly, Jack lost his balance and went crashing into the other pieces of armor. The metal plates and weapons clattered to the floor. Jack lay on the floor in the dark. He tried to get up, but his head was too heavy. He heard deep voices. Someone grabbed him by the arm. The next thing he knew, his helmet was yanked off. He was staring into the blazing light of a fiery torch. brings us to chapter 6 already. I'm going to keep going. This chapter is called Ta-da! In the torchlight, Jack saw 3 huge men standing over him. One with very squinty eyes who held the torch. One with a very red face. And one with a very long mustache who was holding on to Annie. Annie was kicking and yelling. "Stop!" said the one with the very long mustache. "Who art thou?" "Spies, foreigners, Egyptians, who are you?" "No!" "Oh, brother," said Jack. "Arrest them," said Redface. "To the dungeon," said Squinty Eyes. The guards marched Jack and Annie out of the armory. Jack looked back frantically. Where was his backpack? "Go," said a guard, giving him a push. And Jack went. Down they marched, down the long, dark hallway. Squinty, Annie, Mustache, Jack, and Redface. Down a narrow, winding staircase. Jack heard Annie shouting at the guards. "Dummies! Meanies! We didn't even do anything!" The guards laughed. They didn't take her seriously at all. At the bottom of the staircase was a big iron door with a bar across it. Squinty pushed the bar off the door. Then he shoved at the door. It creaked open. Jack and Annie were pushed into a cold, clammy room. The fiery torch lit the dungeon. There were chains hanging from dirty walls. Water was dripping from the ceiling. It was making puddles on the floor. It was the creepiest place Jack had ever seen. "Well, keep them here until the feast is done. Then turn them over to the Duke. He knows how to take care of thieves." "If the rats don't get them first," said Red, and they all laughed. Jack saw that Annie had his backpack. He was quietly unzipping it. "Come on, let's chain the 2 of them," said Squinty. The guards started towards them. Annie whipped her flashlight out of the pack. "Ta-da!" she yelled, and the guards froze. They stared at the shiny flashlight in her hand. Annie switched on the light. The guards gasped in fear. They jumped back at the wall. Squinty dropped the torch. It fell into a dirty puddle on the floor, sputtered, and went out. "My magic wand," said Annie, waving the flashlight. "Get down, or I'll wipe you out." Jack's mouth dropped open. Annie fiercely pointed her light at one and then the other. Each howled and covered his face. "Down, all of you! Get down!" So here's Annie. Can you see that? She's shining her flashlight at the knights. Jack couldn't believe it. "Come on," Annie said to him. "Let's go." Jack looked at the open doorway. He looked at the guards quaking on the ground. "Hurry," said Annie. In one quick leap, Jack followed her out of the terrible dungeon. All right, that brings us to chapter 7. So I'll stop here, putting our bookmark in, and I'll pick back up tomorrow. So boys and girls, go ahead and get started on your work. As always, if you have any help, please have your parents try to help you first, and then you can reach out to me if you need anything else, okay? Have a good day. Bye.